This is Dan Rather, and I'm going to tell you about his attempted kidnapping. His alleged. If you ever watched the CBS Evening News prior to 2005, you recognize anchorman Dan Rather. In 1980, he called for a cab to pick him up at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. The driver who showed up was Eugene Phillips. Dan Rather was scheduled for an interview at the home of author Studs Terkel, and he was to meet his producer and his crew at the home. But according to Dan Rather, Eugene did not go directly to the home. He instead drove 6 miles out of the route and refused to let Dan out of the car. Dan Rather was finally able to flag down another motorist by waving his hands and screaming out the window. The other driver, who happened to be a guard at the Cook County Jail, pulled up alongside the cab and flashed her badge and demanded that the cabbie pull over, but instead Eugene took off and kept going. Another bystander car joined in the pursuit with the jail guard, and they finally were able to get Eugene to stop the cab. Dan Rather jumped out of the cab screaming and yelling about how this man had attempted to kidnap him. But the cab driver had a different story and was upset and irate, saying that Dan Rather still owed him $12 for the ride. Police arrived shortly after and Eugene Phillips was arrested. But he claimed that he did not try to kidnap Dan Rather, he just couldn't find the address. But when he did find the address, he pulled over to let Dan Rather out, and Dan refused to pay the fare at that point, saying that he had gotten lost and he didn't believe that he had his license or some stuff like that. So instead of letting him out of the car, Eugene took off with his passenger in the car still to try to find a police officer, which was not an uncommon thing to do with a passenger that refused to pay for a ride. Although Dan Rather attempted to get Eugene Phillips' license revoked, the charges were eventually dropped. So who do you believe? The cabbie or the news anchor? Let me know in the comments. Follow me for more Hollywood stories and find my podcast link in my bio.